guys, I'm not just Alec here, and in the past week, well, more than a week now, because I had to delay this video, I was using an iPhone 6, this one right here. And honestly, I think it was a great phone. Okay, so I'm going to be talking about the week I spent with this iPhone 6, and this is in fact an iPhone 6. Now yes, I did switch to an iPhone 6 for a week, but it really did feel like a modern phone in some ways. Although in other ways it felt like an old phone, but that is to be expected because this is a 4-year-old phone. So in 2014, Apple released a phone called the iPhone 6. I'm pretty sure it was September. I'm not quite sure, but I was really not excited. I was just really curious about this new iPhone 6, and I did Google searches about it. I just thought it was the coolest phone ever. And I didn't think it was the coolest phone ever. I was just interested about what Apple was releasing because my brother recently got an iPhone. Like my brother recently was talking about how he wants an iPhone 5S, and well, yeah. So I got a new Android phone. I got a really bad phone from LG. Actually, I have it right there. It's in the original box, but I got a new phone. It was I know I was really young, but. It was really interesting to me that Apple released this awesome new phone with this new design and everything, and it was the first time Apple really did something like this. And Apple still supports it up to iOS 12, and it works great with iOS 12, except the fingerprint scanning hasn't been an issue. My grandma also has an iPhone 6, and she's also having issues with her fingerprint scanning, but I'm also having some issues with this iPhone 6 that are unique to my unit, because this is slightly cracked. It's not that noticeable. You have to look close to in order to notice it, but then there's an issue with the screen. Like sometimes when you turn on the screen, it goes black, and you have to turn it off and turn it on. Otherwise, it works great. It looks like a great phone. So what phone was I switching from? I was switching from the Samsung Galaxy S9, and I actually have it recording me right now because that phone has a great camera. I decided to use that amazing camera to record myself. So yeah, I'm gonna cut to another scene now. This is a bit hard, but watch. Because there's a weird line where I can't drag, it's like a different touchscreen basically. It acts like I'm transferring to a different touchscreen, so it thinks that I'm letting go of the icon. Looking at this iPhone, the first thing I notice is how great the screen looks. I mean, it's not the best looking screen ever, but for 2014, this is a pretty nice screen, and app is updating in Gmail. So, yeah, looking at this phone, it looks great. It looks like your standard iPhone. It even looks the same as the iPhone 7 from 2 years ago, but it works great. It's all on iOS 12, and it's all nice and updated, and it's telling me it's updated, and it truly is a great phone, but the age really does affect the phone in some ways. The phone is slower than it should be, and it's not as snappier as modern phones, but this is what Samsung had at the time. The Galaxy S5. Now, my Galaxy S5 that I have here is currently out of battery, but this is what Samsung had around that time, and comparing these two phones, I mean, this one has a case, so if I actually take off the case from the iPhone quickly, looking at these designs, I mean, you could tell me which one you think looks more modern. From the front, I personally think the Galaxy looks more modern. From the back, the iPhone looks a lot better. Also, things like the thickness and the thinness, whatever you want to call it, the iPhone's thinner. The iPhone just feels much better in the hand than the Galaxy, even though I personally do think the Galaxy looks better from the front. The fingerprint scanning technology is better on the Apple device, but again, my grandma's having the same issue where it forgets her fingerprints, so if we just type in our code quickly, the phone is pretty snappy, and all the apps that I used on Android were also on this iPhone. Another thing that I noticed about the iPhones is that they do feel the exact same as Android. Like with iOS, I know a lot of people disagree with me, but iOS is so similar to Android. I don't get what all this arguing is about. The feel of the iPhone is exactly the same. Let me put the case in because I don't trust my hands, but there's a couple, the iPhone just the user experience, yes, some people could argue that's better, but other than iMessage and FaceTime, everything else felt exactly the same. I didn't really feel like I needed any other Apple services, and, yeah, just there's nothing about this iPhone that was really appealing to me. The App Store looked worse in my opinion. And like but everything else felt exactly the same. It's incredible. The biggest thing I noticed about iOS that was really different from Android is the way the phone actually looks. The phone looks different. Everything about it, like the phone, it feels different. It's clearly an iPhone. The user experience, pretty much the same. Yes, you do get iMessage, but there's never really been a time where I noticed a difference in iMessage and SMS. Sure, you can send high quality videos, which is a big issue with SMS. And I'm not saying SMS is better than iMessage, just iMessage is way better than SMS. That's what I'm saying. SMS is better is not what I'm saying at all. But iMessage is better is exactly what I'm saying. So just trying to make you guys really understand. My analysis is that I don't really notice a big difference between iOS and Android. When I switched back to Android, I was just happy because of the fact that the phone was much more faster, had a better camera, and a bunch of stuff were just nicer, but that's mainly because of the age of the phone. Now, if I got a new iPhone and a new Android phone, which one would I pick? I'd pick the Android phone. My mom just got an iPhone XR, and when I compared it to my Galaxy S9, it was much heavier, it was much thicker, and the screen didn't look nearly as good. So I think in screen technology, Apple's behind. The fact that Apple made their phone heavier and thicker than their iPhone 6 from 4 years ago, I think that's a big issue. I would still pick Android over iOS, but my conclusion is that iOS isn't that bad, and if you are switching from Android to iOS or iOS to Android, the biggest thing you're going to be missing is apps and in-app purchases. Like, all your old in-app purchases are going to be gone, but other than that, there's really not a lot of differences. But there is something I would like to point out. Upon switching back from iOS to Android, the biggest thing I noticed, the biggest issue, was the messages. When when someone who's on iOS using iMessage on their iPhone tries to text me after switching back to my Android phone, I couldn't receive their text. It all went to my iPhone. I had to disable iMessage, and after that, it just worked perfectly fine. I don't know why iOS does that, but just know this: if you're switching to an Android phone, disable iMessage and FaceTime on your iPhone to properly receive text messages. Otherwise, the conclusion is iOS or Android. They really are so similar. I think all this arguing is over iMessage, basically. That's the only valid point that you could have. The hardware, I think Apple's hardware is great, but it's not for me. But just the fact that they're so similar and no one noticed. Like, if you say you hate iOS and you hate Apple, make sure you've used an iPhone. And if you're gonna say you hate Android, make sure you use a modern Android phone. When I say modern Android phone, it's because old Android phones and modern Android phones, the experience is much different. Old iOS is definitely better than old Android. But the thing is, when I used iOS 7, it felt pretty much the same as modern versions of iOS. But if you're using something like Android from 2013, I'm pretty sure it was Jelly Bean and Kit Kat. Anyway, both of them. Yeah, it was Kit Kat actually. Android Kit Kat is way different from
before I start any part of this video, let me say one thing.
Oreo.
Okay.
Oh no, Pie. I've never used Android Pie. It's not on Samsung yet, but
go to my website. Oreo or Nougat. Check it out.
I'm just gonna say 8.0 or 9.0 because the names are
if I do not play them. For example, today
the most modern versions of Android are so much different from older versions that the older versions feel terrible. Using old iOS feels the same. So
my website first.
Make sure you've used iOS 7 or above to say if you want to say Apple's bad. Make sure you use Android 6 or above or Android 5 or above because most people they're like, oh, I used Android, old Android phone. I asked them what phone.
Let's just continue on.
It was an Android 4. It was a phone that ran Android 4 or below, which I'm going to say this myself. Android 4 or below was terrible compared to what we have now on Android. So that's what I think about this experience of using an iPhone for a week.